I discovered someone had been living in my cabin when I found a stranger's underwear hanging in my bathroom. My name is Trevor Garrison, and I'm a 42-year-old software engineer from Denver, Colorado. 3 years ago, I bought a small cabin in the mountains near Breckenridge as an investment property and weekend getaway. The place was perfect, a 2-bedroom log cabin with a stone fireplace, a wraparound porch, and a view that made every penny of the mortgage worth it. I had specifically chosen a property outside any HOA jurisdiction, or so I thought, because I valued my freedom and didn't want some busybody telling me what color I could paint my shutters. The cabin sat vacant most of the time. I worked long hours during the week and only made it up there once or twice a month during the off-season. In summer, I tried to spend more time there, maybe a long weekend every other week. It was my sanctuary, my escape from the endless video calls and code reviews that filled my weekdays. Everything changed in June of 2023 when I drove up on a Friday evening, excited for a quiet weekend of fishing and reading on the porch. As I pulled into my gravel driveway, I noticed something immediately wrong. There were tire tracks everywhere, fresh ones, and the grass near the entrance looked trampled. My stomach tightened. Had someone broken in? I parked and approached cautiously, fishing my keys from my pocket. Before I could even get the key in the lock, the door swung open, and a middle-aged woman in yoga pants and an expensive-looking fleece jacket stood there with her hands on her hips. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone dripping with irritation, as if I were the intruder. I blinked, completely thrown off. "What? This is my house. Who are you?" "I'm Brenda Patterson, president of the Mountain Vista Homeowners Association," she announced, puffing up like a bird defending its territory. "And you're in violation of several HOA regulations." HOA. "I'm not part of any HOA. This property isn't in an HOA." Brenda's lips pressed into a thin line. "Actually, as of January this year, the county redistricted this entire area, and all properties along Pinewood Ridge are now part of Mountain Vista HOA. You should have received notification." "I never got any notification," I said, my jaw clenching. "And even if I had, that doesn't explain why you're in my house. I'm conducting an inspection. Your property has been vacant for extended periods, which violates our community standards. Vacant properties attract crime and lower property values for the rest of us." I stepped closer, forcing her to back up into my own entryway. "Get out, right now. I don't care what HOA you think you represent. You're trespassing." Brenda didn't budge much. She pulled a thick folder from her designer tote bag and thrust it at me. "These are the violations we've documented over the past 3 months. Overgrown landscaping, peeling paint on the window frames, and extended vacancy. You have 30 days to remedy these issues or face fines." I snatched the folder, barely glancing at it. "How did you even get in here?" "The HOA has master key access to all properties for emergency purposes and inspections. It's in the bylaws." She said this like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "That's insane." "That's breaking and entering. It's community management. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to finish my inspection." She tried to walk past me toward the bedroom hallway. I blocked her path. "No, you're done. Get out or I'm calling the police." Brenda's eyes narrowed, and I saw the full force of her Karen personality emerge. "You don't want to make an enemy of me, Mr. Garrison. I have the full support of the HOA board, and we take our community standards very seriously. If you want to keep this property, you'll learn to comply. Get out." She huffed, gathered her things with exaggerated movements, and marched out the door. "You'll be hearing from our attorney," she called over her shoulder before climbing into a white Lexus SUV and driving away. I stood in my doorway, heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. The folder in my hands was indeed full of photos of my property, dated and annotated with ridiculous complaints. Grass exceeds 4 inches in height. Visible cobwebs on exterior light fixtures. Vehicle not parked in designated area during owner absence. That night, I couldn't relax. I searched through every drawer and file box in the cabin, looking for any notification about this HOA. Nothing. I checked my Denver address, both physical mail and my email spam folders. Still nothing. I called my real estate attorney first thing Monday morning. "Trevor, I've heard about this," Jennifer Martinez said over the phone. She'd handled my cabin purchase and was usually unflappable, but I detected concern in her voice. "Mountain Vista HOA has been aggressive. The county did redistrict, but the notification process was apparently mishandled. Several property owners are complaining they never received proper notice. Can they just claim authority over my property without my consent? Unfortunately, if the county officially designated the area as part of the HOA district, yes. Colorado law allows for involuntary HOA inclusion in certain circumstances, especially if it's tied to infrastructure improvements or community development plans. But the key access thing, that's questionable. Breaking into your home for an inspection without your permission or a legitimate emergency could be illegal. So what do? Document everything. Change your locks. Send them a certified letter explicitly revoking any permission to enter your property. I'll look into the legality of the redistricting and see if we can challenge it." I followed her advice. That week, I drove back up to the cabin and changed all the locks. I installed security cameras at every entrance, the kind that sent alerts to my phone and recorded to the cloud. I sent Brenda Patterson and the Mountain Vista HOA board a certified letter, CC'd to Jennifer, stating that they had no permission to enter my property under any circumstances, and that any future entry would be considered criminal trespassing. Brenda's response came 10 days later, a formal letter on HOA letterhead. In it, she acknowledged my concerns, but stated that the HOA maintained the right to enter for emergencies and compliance checks, as outlined in the recorded covenants. She also informed me that I owed 6 months of back dues, totaling $1,800, plus late fees. The letter ended with a passive-aggressive reminder that failure to comply with HOA regulations could result in liens against the property. I paid the dues under protest, making sure to note in my payment that it was not an acknowledgement of the HOA's authority over my property. Jennifer was still researching the legal angles, but these things moved slowly. Summer rolled on, and I tried to enjoy my cabin despite the tension. I saw Brenda occasionally, always from a distance, walking the neighborhood with a clipboard like some kind of suburban Gestapo. She'd wave with fake friendliness, and I'd ignore her. Then July arrived, and I decided to spend a full week at the cabin. I needed the break. Work had been brutal. A major project had gone sideways, and I was burning out. I packed up my car with a week's worth of groceries, fishing gear, and a stack of books I'd been meaning to read, and headed into the mountains on a Sunday afternoon. As I approached the cabin, I saw 3 cars parked in my driveway and around the property. My security cameras had been acting weird all week, going offline periodically, which I'd attributed to internet issues. Now, I understood something else was happening. I parked on the road and walked up. Through the windows, I could see people moving around inside my cabin. A family from the looks of it, kids. I heard laughter and music. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. The scene inside stopped me cold. A family of 5 parents and 3 kids were sitting in my living room like they owned the place. Suitcases were stacked in the corner. The kitchen counter was covered with their groceries. Someone had rearranged my furniture. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted. The father, a balding man in a Hawaiian shirt, jumped up from the couch. "Whoa, who are you? I own this house. Who are you and how did you get in here?" The mother, clutching her youngest child, looked terrified. "We rented this place. We have a reservation. We paid for the whole week." "You what? From who?" "The listing online. Mountain Vista Vacation Rentals. We've got the confirmation email and everything." The father was already pulling out his phone, showing me a professional-looking rental listing. It was my cabin, no doubt about it. The photos showed my living room, my bedroom, even my porch. The listing described it as a charming mountain retreat available for weekly rentals. The price was steep too, $2,500 a week. "This is fraud," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I never authorized this." "Who did you pay?" "The property management company. Mountain Vista." "We dealt with a woman named Brenda." Of course it was Brenda." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. These people were victims too. "Look, I'm sorry, but you've been scammed. This is my home and it's not for rent. I don't know what you paid or who you paid it to, but you need to leave." The mother started crying. The kids looked scared and confused. The father's face turned red. "We paid $2,500 for this week. We drove 8 hours. Our vacation is planned around this." "I understand, and I'm sorry, but this isn't legal. Someone stole my property listing and rented it without permission. You need to contact whoever you paid and get your money back. But you cannot stay here." The situation devolved quickly. The father threatened to call the police, which I encouraged because I wanted them involved anyway. His wife called their credit card company. The kids started crying. It took 2 hours, but eventually the family packed up and left, furious and heartbroken. The father promised he'd sue someone, and I believed him. As soon as they were gone, I called Jennifer. It was Sunday evening, but she answered. "Jennifer, it's worse than we thought. Brenda has been renting out my cabin." "What?" I explained everything. Jennifer's silence on the other end was heavy. "Trevor, this is criminal fraud, possibly grand theft. You need to call the police right now and file a report, and check your security cameras, see how long this has been going on." I spent that night reviewing camera footage. The intermittent outages weren't technical issues. Someone had been physically disconnecting the cameras, then reconnecting them later. But they hadn't been thorough, and I had plenty of footage. The evidence was damning. Over the past 6 weeks, since early June, there had been 5 different families or groups staying at my cabin. Each stayed about a week. Between guests, I saw Brenda herself coming and going, cleaning, restocking supplies, doing changeovers like a professional property manager. She'd even brought in a cleaning crew at one point. I called the Summit County Sheriff's Office and filed a report. Deputy Sarah Kowalski came out the next morning, took my statement, and reviewed the camera footage I'd compiled. "This is definitely criminal," she said, shaking her head. "Theft by deception, fraud, criminal trespass. How much do you think she made?" If she charged $2,500 a week and she had 5 bookings, that's $12,500 minimum. But I need to find out if there were more bookings before I installed the cameras. Deputy Kowalski assured me she'd investigate thoroughly. She took copies of all my evidence and said a detective would follow up. Meanwhile, I checked my cabin top to bottom. Things were missing. Small things at first, a set of kitchen knives, some expensive towels, a fishing rod. But then I noticed bigger items. A painting I'd bought from a local artist gone. The good coffee maker gone. A leather chair that had cost me $800 replaced with a cheap imitation. I documented everything with photos and added it to my police report. 2 days later, Detective Mark Hughes contacted me. He was a no-nonsense investigator in his 50s who'd apparently dealt with Brenda Patterson before. "This woman has been a problem," he told me over coffee at a diner in Silverthorne. "We've had complaints about her HOA tactics, but nothing criminal we could act on. This is different. This is serious." "How long will the investigation take?" "Depends on how cooperative she is. I'll be interviewing her this week. I need to examine her financial records, find out where the money went, how many bookings she actually took." "Do you know if she rented out any other properties?" "I have no idea, but it wouldn't surprise me." Detective Hughes nodded grimly. "I'll check. In the meantime, keep your property secured. Don't engage with her directly. Let us handle it." I tried to follow his advice, but staying away was hard. This was supposed to be my refuge, and now it felt violated. I took a week off work and stayed at the cabin, reclaiming my space. I changed the locks again, added more cameras, and even installed a smart lock that would alert me if anyone tried to tamper with it. Jennifer worked on the civil side. She drafted a demand letter to Brenda Patterson and the Mountain Vista HOA, seeking return of all rental income, compensation for stolen and damaged property, and legal fees. The letter laid out the evidence and made it clear we were prepared to file a lawsuit. Brenda's response came through her attorney, a sleazy-looking guy named Richard Kemper. His letter denied everything. According to Kemper, Brenda had been acting in her capacity as HOA president to temporarily manage vacant properties for the benefit of the community. The rental income had gone into the HOA's general fund to pay for neighborhood improvements. She'd had every right to do this under the HOA's emergency management provisions. It was absurd, and Jennifer said as much in her reply. There was no emergency, no legal basis for seizing someone's property and renting it out. This was theft, plain and simple. The detective's investigation progressed through July. He obtained warrants for Brenda's financial records and discovered the truth was even worse than we'd thought. Brenda hadn't just rented my cabin. She'd been doing this to 3 other properties in the area, all owned by people who only visited occasionally. The total amount she'd stolen over 2 summers was staggering. "Trevor, sit down for this," Detective Hughes said when he called me in early August. "We've traced rental income of over $60,000. I nearly dropped my phone. $60,000? Yeah. Your cabin alone generated about $22,000 over 2 summers. She started smaller last year, just a few bookings in July and August. This year she ramped up, renting your place almost continuously from May through early July. The other properties brought in similar amounts. She was running a full-scale illegal rental operation. Where did the money go? Mostly personal expenses. New car, home renovations, a trip to Hawaii. Some of it went into HOA accounts, but she had signing authority on those accounts and was using HOA money for personal expenses too. We're looking at fraud, embezzlement, theft, multiple counts. The district attorney is very interested." I felt a grim satisfaction. Brenda was going down. But she wasn't done fighting. In mid-August, right when I thought things were moving toward resolution, I received a notice that the Mountain Vista HOA was placing a lien on my property for unpaid fines and violations. The total was $15,000, an absurd amount cobbled together from made-up violations going back months. Jennifer laughed when she saw it. "This is retaliation, and it's going to backfire on her badly. File this with the detective. It's evidence of her pattern of abuse." The detective agreed. The lien was filed right after Brenda learned she was under investigation. Clear retaliation. It actually helped our case. In September, the district attorney filed criminal charges against Brenda Patterson. 8 felony counts, including theft, fraud, embezzlement, and criminal impersonation. The news hit the local papers, and suddenly I was getting calls from other property owners who'd had issues with Brenda and the Mountain Vista HOA. One man, another part-time resident, told me his cabin had been rented out too, but he hadn't noticed because he'd been dealing with a family emergency and hadn't visited in over a year. Another woman said Brenda had been charging her bogus fines and threatening foreclosure if she didn't pay. The stories piled up, painting a picture of systematic abuse and corruption. The HOA board, which consisted of Brenda and 2 other members who apparently rubber-stamped whatever she wanted, tried to distance themselves. The other board members claimed they'd had no idea what Brenda was doing, that she'd acted alone. Detective Hughes wasn't buying it, and neither was I. My civil lawsuit moved forward in parallel with the criminal case. Jennifer filed in Summit County District Court, seeking full restitution of the rental income, damages for stolen property, emotional distress, and punitive damages. We also sued the Mountain Vista HOA itself, arguing that the organization was liable for Brenda's actions. Brenda's attorney tried to get the lawsuit dismissed, arguing that we should wait until the criminal case concluded. The judge denied the motion. Both cases would proceed. Discovery was brutal for Brenda. Jennifer subpoenaed everything: financial records, HOA meeting minutes, email correspondence, rental listings, guest communications. The evidence was overwhelming. Brenda had created an entire fake property management company, complete with a website and booking system. She'd used fake names in some communications, posed as a legitimate business, and collected tens of thousands of dollars from unsuspecting tourists. The rental listings themselves were professional. She'd taken high-quality photos of my cabin and the other properties, written enticing descriptions, and posted them on multiple vacation rental platforms. She'd even collected reviews from guests, most of whom had no idea they were staying in someone's illegally rented home. Reading those reviews was surreal. Guests raved about the charming cabin, the responsive host, and the beautiful mountain getaway. They had no clue they were participating in a crime. Several mentioned communicating with Brenda at Mountain Vista, who'd been so helpful and accommodating. In October, I attended Brenda's arraignment. I wanted to see her face when she entered her plea. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, with maybe 20 seats for observers. Brenda arrived with her attorney, dressed conservatively in a navy suit, her hair pulled back. She looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than that first day she'd confronted me in my cabin. When the judge read the charges, Brenda stood stiffly. Her attorney entered a plea of not guilty. The judge set bail at $50,000, which Brenda posted. As she left the courtroom, she glanced my way. For a moment, our eyes met. I saw anger there, but also something else. Fear maybe, or the dawning realization that she'd destroyed her life over greed and control. The pretrial process dragged through fall and into winter. Jennifer pushed hard on the civil case, and by December, we had a mediation scheduled. Brenda's attorney was making noises about settling, probably because the evidence was so damning and the criminal case was looming. The mediation took place in a conference room in a professional building in Frisco. I sat on one side of the table with Jennifer. Brenda and her attorney sat across from us. A professional mediator, an older woman with gray hair and a calm demeanor, facilitated. Brenda looked terrible. She'd aged years in the past 6 months. Her face was drawn, her eyes red-rimmed. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The mediator started by outlining the issues. Mr. Garrison is seeking restitution for rental income earned from his property without permission, compensation for stolen items, legal fees, and punitive damages. The total claim is approximately $60,000. Mrs. Patterson, your attorney has indicated a willingness to discuss settlement. Is that correct? Richard Kemper nodded. My client acknowledges certain irregularities in how she managed properties within the HOA. She's prepared to offer a settlement to resolve this matter without further litigation. Jennifer cut in immediately. Irregularities. Your client ran a criminal enterprise for 2 years, stealing from property owners and defrauding tourists. Let's not minimize what happened here. Kemper's jaw tightened. The criminal case is separate. Today we're discussing civil liability. The mediation went in circles for 2 hours. Kemper tried to lowball us, offering $20,000. Jennifer countered with the full amount plus interest. Brenda sat silently through most of it, occasionally whispering to her attorney. Finally, the mediator suggested a break. Jennifer and I stepped into a hallway. What do you think? I asked. She's desperate. The criminal case is killing her. She wants this civil case resolved so she can focus on staying out of prison. We have all the leverage. How much should we settle for? I think we can get close to full restitution, maybe $50,000. That covers your documented damages and legal fees. We might have to give up the punitive damages, but honestly, she's going to prison. That's punishment enough. I thought about it. The money mattered, but more than that, I wanted acknowledgement of what she'd done. I wanted her to admit it, to face it. When we returned to the conference room, I spoke directly to Brenda for the first time that day. Why did you do this? She looked up, startled. Kemper started to object, but I held up my hand. No, I want to know. You were the HOA president. You had a nice house, a nice car. Why steal from me? Why violate my home? Brenda's eyes filled with tears. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I thought I was helping the community. Properties sitting vacant, it brings down values. I thought if I could generate income, improve the neighborhood, everyone would benefit. That's garbage, and you know it. You pocketed most of the money. You bought yourself a new car and went to Hawaii. This was greed. She flinched. I made mistakes. I know that. I thought I could manage it, keep everything under control. It got out of hand. You stole from me. You let strangers sleep in my bed, use my things, invade my privacy. You took something that wasn't yours and didn't care about the consequences. Brenda broke down then, sobbing into her hands. Kemper put a hand on her shoulder, looking uncomfortable. The mediator waited patiently. After a few minutes, Brenda composed herself. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much, but I am. I'll pay back everything I took. I'll sell my house if I have to. I just want this to be over. The mediator seized the moment. Mrs. Patterson, are you prepared to settle for the full amount of documented damages? Kemper jumped in. My client doesn't have $50,000 liquid. Her assets are tied up, and with the criminal case, she's facing significant legal bills. Jennifer leaned forward. Then we'll take a structured settlement. $25,000 immediately, the rest in monthly payments over 2 years. If she misses a payment, the full amount becomes due immediately, and we resume litigation. After more back and forth, we reached an agreement. Brenda would pay $48,000 total, half immediately and the rest over 18 months. The settlement included a detailed admission of what she'd done, which could be used in the criminal case. She'd also resign from the HOA board and cooperate in dissolving the illegitimate liens she'd placed on properties. I signed the settlement agreement with mixed feelings. The money was good, and I'd get my property back free and clear. But part of me wanted the public vindication of a trial, wanted a judge to rule in my favor and condemn what Brenda had done. Jennifer assured me the criminal case would provide that vindication. The criminal trial was set for March. Over the winter, I focused on reclaiming my cabin, making it mine again. I repainted the interior, bought new furniture to replace what had been stolen or damaged, and spent long weekends there, slowly washing away the violation I'd felt. Other property owners from the Mountain Vista area reached out. We formed a loose coalition, sharing information and supporting each other through the legal process. 2 other owners filed their own civil suits against Brenda. The woman who'd been threatened with foreclosure filed a complaint with the state attorney general's office about HOA abuse. The Mountain Vista HOA itself collapsed under the weight of scandal. The other board members resigned. Property owners voted to dissolve the organization entirely. It turned out the redistricting that had created the HOA in the first place was legally questionable, pushed through by a county commissioner who had ties to Brenda. The commissioner ended up under investigation too, though that was beyond my direct concern. In early March, the criminal trial began. The Summit County Courthouse was a modern building in Breckenridge, all glass and wood, designed to blend with the mountain aesthetic. I attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery with the other victims. The prosecution laid out a meticulous case. They called the tourists who'd rented my cabin, who testified about booking through Mountain Vista Vacation Rentals and dealing with Brenda. They called the other property owners who'd been victimized. They presented the financial records showing where the money went. They showed the fraudulent rental listings, the fake business documents, the evidence of breaking and entering. Brenda's defense was weak. Her attorney tried to argue that she genuinely believed she had authority to manage vacant properties under HOA rules, that this was a civil dispute blown out of proportion. The jury didn't buy it. The evidence was too clear, the intent too obvious. I testified on the 3rd day. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Chen, walked me through discovering the rental scheme, the violation I'd felt, the invasion of privacy. I described coming to my cabin expecting a quiet weekend and finding strangers in my home. I explained the financial impact, the emotional toll, the months of legal battles. On cross-examination, Brenda's attorney tried to make me seem unreasonable, an absentee owner who didn't care about the property or the community. It backfired. I calmly explained that I'd bought the cabin specifically to escape the city, that it was my sanctuary, and that I had every right to use my property however I wanted without interference from a corrupt HOA president. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Under Colorado law, Brenda faced up to 12 years in prison for the combined charges. The prosecution recommended 6 years. The defense begged for probation, arguing that Brenda had no prior criminal record and had cooperated in making restitution. Judge Patricia Ramirez, a stern woman in her 60s, listened to both sides. Then she addressed Brenda directly. "Mrs. Patterson, you held a position of trust in your community. Property owners relied on you to act in their best interests, to follow the law, to respect their rights. Instead, you exploited that trust for personal gain. You violated people's homes, stole their property, and defrauded tourists who came to Colorado expecting a legitimate vacation rental. Your actions were calculated, sustained over 2 years, and caused significant harm. While I appreciate that you've begun making restitution, that doesn't erase the severity of what you did." Judge Ramirez sentenced Brenda to 4 years in the Colorado Department of Corrections, with eligibility for parole after 2 years. She also imposed fines and a restitution order covering all the money stolen, including amounts owed to property owners who hadn't filed civil suits. Brenda stood still as the sentence was read, then collapsed into her chair, weeping. Bailiffs led her away in handcuffs. I felt a strange emptiness as I left the courthouse that day. Justice had been served, but it didn't feel triumphant. It felt sad, like a waste of everyone's time and energy. Brenda had destroyed her life for $60,000 and a power trip. I'd gotten my property back, gotten my money, but I'd lost something too. A sense of safety and peace in a place that was supposed to be my escape. Over the following months, I worked on rebuilding that sense of peace. I visited the cabin more often, inviting friends and family, filling it with good memories to replace the bad ones. I joined a local property owners group, not an HOA but a voluntary association focused on genuine community issues like road maintenance and wildlife management. The settlement payments came in as scheduled. Brenda's family apparently sold her house to cover the debts, and the money was distributed to the victims. By the end of the year, I'd received the full $48,000 we'd agreed to in mediation, plus additional restitution ordered by the criminal court. Jennifer helped me file a formal complaint with the state about the questionable HOA redistricting. An investigation found that proper procedures hadn't been followed, and the county was forced to reverse the designation. My cabin and the other properties were officially removed from any HOA jurisdiction. It was a small victory, but it mattered. I also heard from several of the tourists who'd unknowingly rented my cabin. Most had gotten refunds from their credit card companies or travel insurance, but a few had fallen through the cracks. I reached out to them directly, explained what had happened, and helped them pursue claims against Brenda's restitution fund. It seemed like the right thing to do. They'd been victims too. One couple, the family with 3 kids who I'd encountered that awful day in July, sent me a letter. They'd been devastated by the experience, their vacation ruined, their kids traumatized by the confrontation. But they understood I was a victim too and didn't hold it against me. They hoped I'd find peace in my cabin again. The letter was kind and forgiving, and it moved me more than I expected. By the second anniversary of discovering the rental scheme, life had largely returned to normal. I still worked in Denver during the week, still escaped to the cabin on weekends. The mountains were the same, the air just as clean, the view just as stunning, but I'd changed. I was more cautious, more aware of the ways people could abuse power and trust. I'd learned to document everything, to stand up for my rights, to not let intimidation tactics work. I also developed a weird sort of sympathy for the other property owners who'd been targeted. We'd formed bonds through the shared trauma, and we stayed in touch. One guy, a retired teacher named Bob, became a regular fishing buddy. We'd spend afternoons on the lake, talking about everything except HOAs and legal battles, just enjoying the peace we'd fought to reclaim. The Mountain Vista neighborhood itself recovered slowly. Without Brenda's iron-fisted rule, property owners started communicating directly with each other, helping with genuine issues without the overhead of formal HOA bureaucracy. Someone organized a voluntary cleanup day. Another person started a phone tree for alerting neighbors about bear sightings or road closures. It was community without coercion, and it worked better than Brenda's system ever had. I sometimes wondered about Brenda in prison. I'd heard through the grapevine that she was serving her time at the Colorado Women's Correctional Facility in Cannon City. I didn't wish her additional suffering. Prison was punishment enough, and I hoped she was using the time to reflect and change. But I also didn't feel guilty about pursuing justice. What she'd done was wrong, and there had to be consequences. The legal system had worked, slowly and imperfectly, but it had worked. The criminal charges had held Brenda accountable. The civil lawsuit had provided restitution. The regulatory complaints had fixed the underlying HOA problem. It had taken nearly 2 years from discovery to resolution, countless hours of work, significant legal fees, and immense stress. But in the end, every dollar she'd stolen had been repaid, and the system that allowed her abuse had been dismantled. I kept all the documentation from the case in a file box in my Denver condo. Sometimes I'd flip through it, remembering the anger and violation I'd felt, but also the satisfaction of fighting back and winning. It was a reminder that standing up to bullies mattered, that defending your rights was worth the effort, and that justice, however delayed, was still justice. The cabin became my sanctuary again, truly this time. I upgraded the security system one last time, not out of paranoia but out of practicality. I wanted alerts if anything unusual happened, but I also wanted to trust that my space was my own. I painted the exterior a deep forest green, not because any HOA required it, but because I thought it looked good against the pines. I built a fire pit in the backyard and spent cool evenings sitting under the stars, listening to the wind through the trees. Friends who visited commented on how peaceful the place felt. They didn't know the full story of what had happened, just that there'd been some legal trouble with an HOA. I didn't belabor it. The cabin was about moving forward now, not dwelling on the past. I did give one interview to a local newspaper reporter who was writing about HOA abuse in Colorado. I shared my story, hoping it might help other property owners recognize the warning signs and stand up for themselves. The article ran in the Summit Daily News and got picked up by a few other outlets. I received emails from people across the state who'd had similar experiences, though usually not as extreme. It felt good to shine a light on the issue, to contribute to a broader conversation about HOA reform. Colorado legislators even introduced a bill to tighten regulations on HOA powers, specifically limiting their ability to access private property without explicit permission, except in genuine emergencies. The bill cited cases like mine as examples of abuse. It passed the State House and Senate and was signed into law. I was invited to the signing ceremony but declined. I'd had enough of the spotlight, but I was glad the law changed, glad that future property owners would have more protection. As I sit here now, writing this all out, 3 years after that first shocking discovery of strangers in my cabin, I feel a sense of closure I didn't expect to reach. The cabin is mine, fully and completely, with no cloud over the title, no lien on the property, no HOA threatening fines or violations. The financial losses have been repaid. The emotional wounds have healed mostly. I've learned that property rights matter, that privacy matters, and that standing up to abuse, even when it's wrapped in the veneer of community governance, is essential. I've learned that the legal system, for all its flaws and delays, can deliver justice if you're persistent and have good representation. I've learned that people like Brenda, who let power corrupt them, ultimately destroy themselves as much as they harm others. Most importantly, I've reclaimed what was stolen from me, not just the money or the physical property, but the sense of peace and ownership that makes a house a home. Every weekend I spend at the cabin now is a small victory, a reminder that I fought for what was mine and won. The mountains don't care about HOAs or legal battles or human dramas. They stand eternal, indifferent, beautiful. That perspective helps. Whatever chaos humans create in the valleys, the peaks remain, and there's comfort in that permanence. I've also become something of an accidental advocate for property rights. I get calls occasionally from people dealing with HOA issues, asking for advice. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm careful about what I say, but I share my experience and emphasize the importance of documentation, legal representation, and not backing down when you're in the right. If my ordeal can help others avoid similar situations or fight back when they face abuse, then at least something good came from it. The cabin itself has appreciated in value, ironically. The area has grown in popularity, and real estate prices have climbed. If I wanted to sell, I could probably make a significant profit. But I'm not selling. This place means too much now, not despite what happened, but in some ways because of it. I fought for it, defended it, and won it back. That makes it more valuable than any market price could reflect. I've even started renting out the cabin occasionally, legally this time, through a legitimate property management company I vetted carefully. It felt strange at first, given what Brenda had done, but I realized that short-term rentals themselves aren't the problem. Theft and fraud are the problem. Done right, with proper permissions and legal structures, renting out a vacation property is a reasonable use of an investment. I take a few bookings during peak season when I know I won't be using the cabin, and the income helps offset the mortgage and maintenance costs. The first guests I hosted under this legitimate arrangement were a young couple from Texas celebrating their anniversary. They left a glowing review and a handwritten thank you note. Reading that note, I felt a sense of full circle closure. My cabin was being shared with others again, but this time on my terms, legally and ethically. It was healing in a way I hadn't anticipated. I still see Bob, my fishing buddy, regularly. We've formed a friendship that extends beyond our shared experience as Brenda's victims. He's taught me about fly fishing and mountain ecology. I've helped him set up a better computer system and navigate some online bureaucracy. It's a real friendship, grounded in mutual respect and shared interests, and it's one of the unexpected positive outcomes of the whole ordeal. The broader community has changed too. Without the oppressive HOA structure, neighbors actually talk to each other more. There's a voluntary email list where people share information about road conditions, wildlife sightings, and local events. Someone organized a 4th of July potluck last year, and over 30 people showed up. It was chaotic and fun, everything a community gathering should be, with none of the forced compliance that Brenda had tried to impose. I learned that Brenda was released on parole after serving 2.5 years of her sentence. I don't know where she went or what she's doing now. Part of me hopes she's rebuilt her life somewhere, learned from her mistakes, and found a way to contribute positively to society. Part of me doesn't care. She's no longer my problem, no longer a threat, just a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and personal greed. The financial restitution I received went into savings initially. Later, I used some of it to make improvements to the cabin, a new deck, better insulation, upgraded appliances. I figured the money Brenda stole from me by renting my place should go back into making the place better. It felt right, a kind of karmic balance. I also donated some of the restitution money to a legal aid organization that helps people fight HOA abuse. They do good work, representing homeowners who can't afford private attorneys, challenging unfair rules and practices, and advocating for legislative reform. If my experience and the money recovered from it can help others in similar situations, that's worthwhile. Looking back on the entire saga, from that first shocking discovery to the trial and sentencing to the slow process of recovery and healing, I'm struck by how much it changed me. I'm more assertive now, less willing to let things slide or accept unfair treatment. I'm also more compassionate toward others dealing with legal or personal battles, because I understand how exhausting and demoralizing those fights can be. The experience also taught me about the importance of security and documentation in the modern age. Those security cameras I installed saved the case. Without video evidence of Brenda entering my property, renting it out and stealing items, proving what happened would have been much harder. I've become an advocate for property security, not out of paranoia but out of practical experience. People should protect what's theirs. I've thought about writing a book about the experience, expanding this story into a full account with more detail about the legal process and the HOA reform movement. Maybe someday I will. For now, I'm content to share my story when asked and to live my life, enjoying the peace I fought so hard to reclaim. The cabin stands as it always has, solid logs and stone, nestled among the pines with a view of the Continental Divide. Inside, it's warm and comfortable, filled with books and fishing gear and memories both old and new. It's my retreat, my investment, my hard-won sanctuary. No one can take that away from me again because I know my rights. I know how to defend them. And I know that justice, however slow, is worth pursuing. Every time I drive up that gravel driveway now, I feel a sense of ownership that goes deeper than the deed filed at the county recorder's office. I own this place in my bones, in my determination to protect it, in the battles I fought and won. Brenda Patterson tried to take that from me, tried to exploit my property for her gain, but in the end, she failed. She paid back every dollar, served her time, and lost everything she'd tried to protect through her abuse of power. And I'm still here, still visiting my cabin, still enjoying the mountains, still living the life I built for myself. That's the real victory, not the money or the legal judgments, but the simple fact that I didn't let someone else's wrongdoing derail my plans or steal my peace. I stood up, I fought back, and I won. The court made Brenda pay back every dollar she stole, and more importantly, I reclaimed what mattered most, my home, my sanctuary, my mountain refuge. That's justice, served cold and complete, and it's a feeling I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.